Now I'm going to switch over and talk about Eddie, because Eddie's a happy story, I think. Well, in my mind, they were both happy that I saw something happen that was very wonderful. But Eddie is one that we have a lot more hope for. Eddie, I met when I was doing research in an inner city classroom in a very poor school where I'm not sure how much children, and I believe Eddie moved from another environment, so I'm not sure about his literacy experience, but he did speak in English and Spanish. He didn't speak much, and he was in 4th grade, and he had been referred and later placed in special education for the learning disabled. We got to know him because he was part of our research group that he was randomly selected as a student to participate in our pre-instruction, post-instruction science activities. So we did some science activities with him, and then we wanted to find out with him and one of his friends, and we wanted to find out what he knew about science and what he could tell us based on those experiences. And he was very quiet. And I guess the similarity between Eddie and Johnny too is that both of them were quite large and overweight and had beautiful brown eyes and curly hair and very engaging when they became engaged, but very quiet and withdrawn when they weren't. And so he, unless we prompted him, he really didn't respond much. I didn't really know what to think, other than I knew he spoke English and Spanish, and he seemed to be interested. And so we asked at the end that he write a summary, as we did with all of the students, of what he had done and what he had learned. And we received a paper back from him with a heading and 3 paragraphs. And I was very delighted. I thought, well, this is wonderful. He can write for us. When I got the paper, and I always reviewed the papers of the children's writing to see what they said, make sure they had their date, name, and all of that on it. And I looked at this sample from Eddie, and I couldn't read it. At first I thought, this is wonderful, and that there must be something wrong with me. I simply can't read it. And it looked like English words, but there weren't any real words that I could understand. And I'm used to reading children's writing. So I said, okay, well, I need to get Eddie to read this for me. So the next day I took it back to his class, and I sat down with him, and I said, Eddie, I know you wrote this for me. Could you please tell me what it says? Because I'm not sure. I want to make sure I understand everything that you had to say. And he looked at me, and he looked at the paper, and his finger went immediately to the picture. And there was a tiny picture that I hadn't even noticed. And the first picture was, it's about boiling water. And his finger pointed exactly to a very miniature picture of water boiling. I thought, this is amazing. And then he said, and the second one is about steam and smoke. And there was a tiny picture of he had drawn the experiment of the steam and the smoke and the chimneys in the little fishbowl that we had used to show the influence of heat in creating a wind cycle. And the third one is about the rock and the water and the gas, which was the 3 states of matter. And I thought, this is incredible that he's able to draw a picture, and he's written all of these symbols, which obviously don't mean anything to him because he kept pointing to the picture, and that he knows that there needs to be a heading, there need to be paragraphs, and he has no words that he knows how to write that relate to this, so he can draw it. And the drawing is anchoring his memory of what happened. I was very excited about that. Well, for whatever reason, after that, Eddie was placed in another classroom where I didn't know that he was there, and I couldn't, or would have liked to have watched him over time and see how he became literate. But I was always looking for him, and finally, toward the end of the year, I found him. And he was actually in one of our other research classrooms, and I just hadn't known he was there. And so we have a sample now of his writing at the end of the year. And I want you to see how nice this is. This is very exciting, and of course you'll be able to read it, and there shouldn't be a problem with that. But what I want you to focus on is that the drawing that he makes to go along with the reading. In that drawing you can see 2 video cameras. You can see the teacher sitting at the table and 2 students sitting at the table, and all of the equipment that they were using to do the same activities. And I thought, this is amazing in itself, in that he can step back and create this big panorama of this scene, and that there's a lot more going on in his understanding than maybe his writing, if we just took it by itself, would tap into. So my feeling, and then we looked at his FCIT and we looked at his Florida rights. And while he didn't do really well on those, he certainly was able to participate and achieve. And we looked at his final assessment on the science activities, and in the same way, he's not a stellar student, but he's not one that you would say, oh my goodness, we have to send him someplace else because we can't teach him.